They'd been rescued from Islamic State clutches after suffering horrific abuse. Now, American lawyer Jacqueline has launched a campaign to get asylum for 100 Yazidi girls who were kidnapped by IS extremists in Syria. She's been pushing the US Congress for support and is now in Britain, where peers in the House of Lords are campaigning to have the persecution of Yazidis and other religious minorities in Iraq and Syria declared a genocide. We'll be talking with her in a moment. But first, this report from Jane Deeth, and a warning some viewers may find some of the details disturbing.
Jacqueline in Iraq with people from the Yazidi minority. She works with girls abducted by Islamic State, given as gifts to fighters or traded between them for cash.
هو واحد يشتري يبقى مثلا اسبوع او يوم يومين يعني واحد وحشية يوم يومين يرجعها يروح يشتري واحدة ثانية.
IS call Yazidis devil worshippers. It swept through their homeland, driving thousands onto Mount Sinjar, where it had them surrounded and starving before some of them were rescued. IS was driven back from Sinjar, but not before they'd massacred many Yazidi men and older women. Young women and girls were kidnapped. It's feared thousands are still being held. Escapes like this, with the help of a smuggler, are rare. Those who make it out talk of living as IS sex slaves. These women were freed recently by Kurdish fighters.
They forced us to marry them. We stayed in Iraq for 9 months, and then they took us to Syria.
Islamic State rounded us up and pointed their guns at us. They separated men from women and mothers from their children. Then they took young girls and undressed them in front of us and started to check their breasts as we stood watching helplessly. If I had a suicide vest, I would have blown myself up and killed them all.
Thousands of Yazidis are now refugees. Jacqueline wants Britain to offer asylum to 100 Yazidi girls rescued from Islamic State. And she wants the UK to declare IS's actions genocide.
Jacqueline joins us live now. Jacqueline when you talk to Congress, but more particularly at the moment when you talk to the British authorities, do you feel you're pushing at an open door? There was real shock at what happened to the Yazidis, with the Yazidis in the early stages of IS's misperformances.
I believe that I am pushing on a door that must be wide open. The world must do something. This is a responsibility of humanity. It's not just about governments, it's about the entire world. It's not a crisis that exists over there. We've seen it in our own doorsteps just this week with Brussels. We all must stand and make a difference.
The difficulty is that, of course, you're here in an atmosphere in which there's great, well, misunderstanding at times and ignorance, but also fear of migrants, refugees on a huge scale. Into that, how does the fate of 100 Yazidi women fit?
I went to Iraq several times this past year, and I work with the Ministry of Dahouk and the Independent Human Rights Commission. And when I first heard about the story on the news, about the refugee crisis, I didn't understand what it was all about until I saw their faces. These are young girls, girls that can be our daughters, girls that can be our sisters. When you start to think of it like that, you're putting a face on the numbers.
Well, is anybody listening to you?
Yes, they are. The United States Congress, the House of Representatives, with a unanimous vote, said that what has happened is a genocide, because they heard with their own ears and saw with their own eyes people testifying before them and sharing of this horrible atrocity. They're targeting Yazidis, Christians, minorities.
Yeah, but does it mean that the US authorities are going to allow all 100 women in?
We hope so.
Hope.
See, Germany...
See here, the resistance is very strong. There are systems, you've got to go through the system, you've got to take your turn, you've got to prove your case. This could be years.
Well, Lord Alton Dubs just put through, actually, in the House of Lords, an amendment that allows 3,000 unaccompanied children in Europe to come to England. That's a start. It shows a victory. It shows that people have a heart. This is not a political game. These are children at stake. So I do believe that we will get it in when we start to look inside and realize that this is not a political disaster.
But you see what I'm sort of getting at? The consequences of IS, the consequences of the Syrian war are desperate for many, many tens of thousands of young children and women. The atrocity that occurred to the Yazidi women is grave and desperate too, but how do you fit them in and say these women, above all, have the priority?
These women are targeted based on their faiths, whether they're Yazidi or Christian or other minorities. Just because of their faith, they have been targeted, and what they've seen is unbelievable. Ikhlas is an example of that. A girl who's 16 years old, one night, 24 hours, ISIS came in, knocked on the door, took her father, took her brother, shot them in front of her eyes. And to think that that was enough, they took her on a bus with all women that were in the town. They put them in a prison cell. And man after man would decide which ones they wanted to pick up. And they raped them. They tortured them. Many attempted suicide. They are the most targeted victims, and they must be the ones to get the top priority in this matter.
Jacqueline, Isaac, thank you very much indeed for coming in.